I feel that as a director or anything, or as a leader, you can be stubborn and not humble and think that you have best ideas, and that when other people tell you something, you think that you know better. Or you can be humble and understand that actually, in this ecosystem, there's so many smart people, so they know better, most likely, and they repeatedly tell you something that your talent should be in aggregating this. So that's where it comes from, right? So when you understand what you'll do with RWAs, with communication, with PT, then it's just responding to all of this and being willing to do that. It creates that more servant role of the executive director rather the one that tries to build a vision.
Hey everyone, this week for Ethereum's 10th anniversary, we have 2 interviews. The first one is being released today, and it's with Tomasz Stanczak, co-executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. Tomasz and I talked about a lot of things, both retrospective for Ethereum and also forward-looking. One of the sections of our discussion that really struck me was about the relationship between the Ethereum Foundation and the price of Ether. Chatting about ETH's price was actually a big no-no during the early years of the Ethereum Foundation, and last year it felt like at least some portion of the consternation in the Ethereum community came from the underperformance of ETH compared to Bitcoin and Sol. On top of that, the price of ETH, of course, has an effect on security due to Ethereum's proof-of-stake system. But surprisingly, when I asked him about it, he said the foundation doesn't touch on the price of Ether except when discussing the foundation treasury. I guess I had expected some change in that regard since, the period when my book ends, which is in early 2018. But it sounds like it's the same old MO, which maybe Ethereum people are okay with. I'd love to hear from all of you if you think it makes sense for the Ethereum Foundation to, I don't know if ignore is too strong a word, but at least not prioritize the price for any purpose aside from managing the foundation's own treasury. The other few notable moments to me were when he talked about how one of Ethereum's biggest problems is solving interoperability. As he was speaking, I had this thought, but I did forget to verbalize it in the moment, but I'll say it here. So his background, he had recently tweeted that the 3 main priorities for Ethereum in the short term are scaling the layer 1, scaling blobs, which means scaling L2 activity, and improving the UX. So if one of Ethereum's biggest problems is interoperability, then, the thing that I was thinking was that those first 2 priorities, to scale both the L1 and blobs, it's kind of like keeping Ethereum on the same path without addressing the interoperability issue, almost like kicking the can down the road. So, maybe people disagree with me, but, let me know in the comments what you think about that. And on a related note, Tomasz also said that he advocates that all assets be minted on the L1. And he gave some examples of, creators doing so. And, I asked him, would he also say, for instance, that these new creator coins that are being minted on Zora on Base should instead be on the Ethereum L1? He kind of seemed to support that notion, which was interesting. I guess we'll see as time goes on whether or not that becomes a standard. And the last thing that I found especially memorable from my discussion with Tomasz was that he kept connecting Ethereum to the coming wave of innovation in AI, mentioning that Ethereum could be used to help resolve issues with AI centralization. I'm interested to see where that goes. Hopefully it'll be before our robot overlords conquer us. As always, I hope you find this conversation illuminating. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we may quote your comment on the show. Heads up, everyone. We've got exciting news. Bits and Bips, our Macro Meets Crypto show, is officially spinning off into its own podcast feed, YouTube channel, and X account. If you've been enjoying the deep dives into interest rates, monetary policy, and how they intersect with the crypto markets, make sure to follow Bits and Bips wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube and on X. You'll find the links to YouTube, X, and other podcast platforms in the show notes. If you're watching this, there's a QR code on screen. We'll be posting here for a few more weeks, but starting in September, Bits and Bips will launch on its own feed. For now, we will publish longer clips from the show on those accounts. Remember, go to the show notes now and subscribe to Bits and Bips. That's Bits, +BIPS, spelled BIPS, on YouTube, X, and wherever you get your podcasts. Ledn is a leading platform for Bitcoin-backed loans, offering a secure and transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling your Bitcoin. Issuing loans since 2018 and earning over 1,000 Trustpilot reviews. Learn more at ledn.io. Mantle is pioneering blockchain for banking, a revolutionary new category at the intersection of TradFi and Web3. Follow Mantle_official to learn more. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unchained, your no-hype resource for all things crypto. I'm your host, Laura Shin. This is the July 31st, 2025 episode of Unchained. Today's guest is Tomasz Stanczak, co-executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. Welcome, Tomasz.
Hi, Laura. Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
All right. So, as we just mentioned, today is the 10th anniversary of the Ethereum blockchain. It's a monumental achievement. I tweeted that the chain has had 100% uptime. It's number one in client diversity, number one in TVL, number one in ecosystem developers. So the Ethereum community has so much to be proud of. And we're recording this at this moment when Ethereum has kind of like a new outlook on life, I would say. Last year was maybe one of its tougher years. Obviously, we saw that it lost ground against Bitcoin and Solana in various ways, both price-wise, but even, for Solana, even lost some developers compared to how much Solana grew in that regard. Ethereum was also not at the center of the last crypto craze, which kind of was the first time to happen in its history. And then, as I'm sure people are aware, toward the end of the year, there was kind of a mini revolt, I guess you could say. We saw some longtime Ethereans leave the community. They were publicly criticizing the foundation, demanding change. So, Tomasz, you now join the Ethereum Foundation, and you are part of this revitalization of Ethereum. I know you've only been in this co-executive director position for a few months, but you've been making palpable changes. So here we are, we're at this moment where the price has gone up at an accelerated pace in the last few months. We've seen inflows in the Ether ETFs outpacing inflows into Bitcoin ETFs. There's a whole slew of Ethereum treasury companies that have been launching. It's like literally, there was another one yesterday. So I'm just so curious to hear your just general thoughts on this, big birthday, your thoughts about Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation, and just reflections on this milestone.
Yeah, that's definitely a great story the last few months. And I think that's, as for me, joining 4 months ago and suddenly you see that much happening, it's definitely a lot of luck or good timing to join and just enter into this stage where everyone was already preparing for it. I think that there's so many builders on Ethereum that were just activating in response to the crisis mode. They all took a few weeks or a few months to start and build. And when you see all the treasury companies, obviously that's been in the making probably for a while. Joe Lubin has done amazing work in that space, and you've seen probably a lot of effort and effective work from Vitalik and Aya and the EF management and all the team leads that realized, oh, okay, there's lots of push from the community to move faster, to react to the changes in regulatory framework. And then I think me and Shelway taking over on the leadership side was just coincidental with everyone realizing that we have to react faster to everything that happens in the Ethereum ecosystem, and the entire ecosystem thinking like, oh, we want to help, and lots of people activating from the stealth mode, from the shadow, from a retirement, like OGs coming back and thinking they have to help. So it's great to celebrate it now. I think it's super important that 10 years of Ethereum happens when everyone is in better moods, that we think that we achieved something on the side of 10 years ago. Everybody was talking about decentralizing finance. And this was really big thing. Or let's say going back to Bitcoin times when we've seen all the bailouts, all the challenges of the global financial systems not maybe being having the oversight or decentralization that we would love to see. The permissionless access, censorship resistance disappearing potentially with the growth of the digital economy. And we had to react, and we see the community achieving so much together. And this is the celebration, and I think it sets beautiful timing for the next 10 years, as it gives a feeling that if we dream big, we can achieve big things. So if we dream big now for the next 10 years, and if we understand what the fears and the biggest challenges of nowadays are, and I think it's all around AI centralization, um, then this is great. This, again, we can feel like we're writing white papers, like we gathering together the communities and start having discussions. I don't know, like the fireside conversations. All of this is so cool about this technology and the movement and the community.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you mentioned narratives because I'm sure you're well aware there's been so many narratives for Ethereum over the years. We've all heard these phrases: a world computer, a decentralized app store, an infinite garden. And I was just so curious, like, what is Ethereum to you? And I would love also, so it's a two-part question. If you were to describe Ethereum to somebody who isn't in crypto, just pick any random person on the globe, but at least let's give them a bare minimum of, like, a smartphone or the internet or whatever. I'd love to hear. So what is it to you? And then how would you describe it to whatever random person you'd like to describe it to?
So first, answering the question about all the different narratives, I think it's also part of the Ethereum. There are many narratives. That plurality of Ethereum is expressed by people dreaming their own vision of the world, or their own changes that they want to introduce to the world through Ethereum, and thinking about that part of Ethereum that describes best of what they want to build. Definitely the word computer feels very natural. And if I go for one, probably I would see the world computer, the one that evolved into understanding of what world computer would mean nowadays, or in the next years, that this is something related to AI, that this is something related to the AI governance, AI coordination, that is something that transcends between the physical and digital, that it connects maybe automation, robotics, automation, and the finance system. And then now, even with emergence of pushing ideas directly to chain, and monetizing ideas, like what you've seen on Zora recently, that's also part of it. So now, coming back to how to talk to people about Ethereum when they want to understand it better, I think best to describe it would be as a technology for the global coordination of economy, for allowing everyone to connect permissionlessly to the single coordination layer of everything that's happening in the world, allowing people to buy, sell, invest, grow, share, coordinate, whether financial ideas or scientific discoveries of the governance on any level, either on the hyperlocal level or on the global level. So that's how Ethereum works. It just delivers this set of agreements of how we can build all of this together, like, so a set of standards, and it just exists there, and it should be less and less visible. But what we're building on top of Ethereum is more and more visible and more impactful.
So, earlier when I asked you kind of about this milestone, I was curious, what your perspective is on how Ethereum has evolved, like what you feel like the various stages of its development is, and what you think the current stage of development is.
Yes, I was saying today that in a way, Ethereum hasn't changed, because there were many visionaries 10 years ago, and I think they've seen the world that we see now. And but the progress in bringing those dreams and those visions into reality definitely had some stages of, maybe in the past it was more of an experimentation stage, and then realizing that you need time to bring the approach to the infrastructure, to building, that is a bit more robust, a bit more really long-term security and resilience focused. So I think we have much of it nowadays. When we celebrate 10 years without interruption, it means that we celebrate 10 years of a lot of dedication and effort from people that are ready to just, without like specific coordination in a given moment, but more like the long-term coordination, being connected to the network, to just be ready to wake up in the night, in the middle of the night, and think, like, is anything on the Ethereum network that requires attention. And generally, the network itself doesn't require any single person or group of people to wake up in the night. It's almost like going through the forks, going through the changes. And then you have like thousands of companies that runs as validators or solo stakers that just keep paying attention to all the live metrics of the network and building and adding and thinking many years ahead about the security and the risks. Like the process of design of the network, the discussions on the core devs are always with the security in the first place. And like, if you scale, how do you harden the protocol not to scale with risks to the network? And this is the stage that says, okay, it's a mature network to onboard global finance, to onboard global economy. And now we see the stage of adoption as well. So, right, you had experimentation, you had lots of experiments going wrong, but with like lower, like the smaller amounts of money or bigger amounts of money as well. And
like the
now
DAO.
yeah, the DAO amount, like if we calculate it in the nowadays terms of like nowadays price of Ethereum, but like I think if we go back at that time, so like everything was smaller really in the context of global economy. And at that time, I remember 2017, 18, 19, people were asking me like, so what will be happening with Ethereum, and why would not everybody start competing with those like degen builders, with the builders that's just our core devs there? Why the banks are not coming to take everything away from others? Like, when did they start the companies? And I said, like, the money was just too small at that time. So even if we think that was big, for many financial institutions, it was just too small. It was nascent technology with small numbers. Now the numbers are bigger. We're talking about multi-trillion-dollar economies. We're talking about multi-trillion-dollar stable coins, products. And we see global adoption. And it's even not there yet, but it feels unstoppable. And this is beautiful. In the next stage, what will be the next stage? I think the next big challenges, and as I mentioned, the fear of AI centralization, the globalization of coordination networks, like those AIs and robotics merge into one thing. And we want to ask where the humanity goes with this. And I think Ethereum was always ready to attract thinkers that want to discuss really big topics, like big threats to humanity. It's just finance was the first thing.
And so I'm curious, like, when you look at all these stages and you're looking at this current stage of adoption and looking forward to what Ethereum will be, what do you think the EF's role has been at those earlier stages, and what do you want its role to be now?
As for the foundation, when I look back, I think it was very important as a coordinator. It has been very important as a coordinator. And that's so I'm thinking about my journey. If I used to be at Nethermind, so starting Nethermind in 2017, and then the foundation existed there and gave us some grants after 1 or 2 years. And then obviously, as I joined all core devs channels, there were some people from the foundation helping with coordination, but at the same time, we were totally independent, and our interactions with the foundation were very, very limited. Which even is important in the context of when I was joining as a co-executive director, people were saying, "Oh, at the time, the foundation was failing because it was not in touch with the builders like me or others." But I felt always like, great, the foundation is there, but I don't want to feel that the foundation is coordinating my work. I mean, not coordinating, is managing my work. It's great. It will be coordinating greater efforts. But like many people, I think I was building some part of Ethereum that felt like my Ethereum or our Ethereum. And many people in the community do that same thing. They don't want the foundation to say Ethereum belongs to foundation. And foundation never tried to do it. So the role doesn't change much. And I think my role as a co-executive director is to simply make foundation as efficient and more successful in its own mandate in what it wants to achieve, which means just help Ethereum to grow, help to focus Ethereum on the values of privacy, of security, of open source solutions, and censorship resistance. So if we set those 4 values for ourselves, we understand there are really lots of gaps among what people are building. They're unfilled in those values areas because it's very often the public commons problem. It's public goods funding. It's coordination towards the right values and long-term thinking. So we continue doing this, and then underneath all of that, coordination of protocol as something that is very robust, resilient, wanting to win through impact, being just built in the confidence that Ethereum network, the protocol itself, will always be the strongest, and never accepting the weakness of the layer one and Ethereum protocol. I think that's the foundation's role as well, to help to do that.
All right, so in a moment, we will learn how Tomasz became co-ED, but first, a quick word from the sponsors who make this show possible. Heads up, everyone. We've got exciting news. Bits and Bips, our Macro Meets Crypto show, is officially spinning off into its own podcast feed, YouTube channel, and X account. If you've been enjoying the deep dives into interest rates, monetary policy, and how they intersect with the crypto markets, make sure to follow Bits and Bips wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube and on X. You'll find the links to YouTube, X, and other podcast platforms in the show notes. If you're watching this, there's a QR code on screen. We'll be posting here for a few more weeks, but starting in September, Bits and Bips will launch on its own feed. For now, we will publish longer clips from the show on those accounts. Remember, go to the show notes now and subscribe to Bits and Bips. That's Bits +Bips, spelled BIPS, on YouTube, X, and wherever you get your podcasts. Wish you could access cash without selling your Bitcoin? Ledn makes that possible. The global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending, Ledn has issued over $9 billion in loans since 2018 and never lost a single Satoshi of client assets. Why is a Ledn loan different? With custody loans, collateral is not lent out to generate interest. No credit checks, funds in less than 12 hours, no monthly payments. Repay whenever you want, with zero penalties. And proof of reserves reports, verified by a top accounting firm, are published every 6 months. Ledn gives Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Learn more at ledn.io. That's LEDN.io. Mantle leads the establishment of blockchain for banking as the next frontier. UR is the access layer that transforms Mantle Network into a purpose-built vertical platform, the blockchain for banking, that enables financial services on-chain. UR unifies and vertically aligns Mantle's focus on payments, trading, and assets. MI4, METH protocol, functions FBTC, supported by developer grants, ecosystem incentives, and the industry-leading distribution platform through the UR app, Reward Station, and Bybit Launch Pool. All economic activity within UR will be captured by Mantle Network to further drive value to token holders and establish its significance in blockchain for banking. Follow Mantle_official to learn more. Back to my conversation with Tomasz. So you said originally that in the process of becoming ED, or co-ED, you had a conversation with Aya, the previous executive director of the Ethereum Foundation, Aya Miyaguchi. And it was more just like, I think, informational, just a conversation. Maybe she was, just trying to hear more from the community. And then she reached back out, and it was after that you became co-ED. So I was curious, what was the process for you and Xiaowei to become these co-executive directors, and why did the foundation decide to have two co-executive directors?
I think the process was very different for me and for Xiaowei, because Xiaowei has been in the foundation for many years. So I'm pretty sure that she's built a lot of trust in her own abilities and in the way she collaborates with Aya, with Vitalik, with the management, while working on the research team and contributing to the merge and many other consensus research aspects. So it might have been clear internally within the organization that there was trust that she'll be great in that position. And then I think at the same time, Foundation was looking for someone who would be coming with more of combination of business and an understanding of Ethereum role. So look, I think I understand why everything that I've been doing before really combines nicely into a profile that is good for the co-executive director role. So it's building business in Ethereum. It's working with a lot of other businesses in Ethereum because of building infrastructure, which means that you collaborate with many of the DeFi builders. I worked on my own DeFi project through Euler. I've been working with many L2s and for Nethermind, working on infrastructure, launching also with the traditional finance businesses through Twin Stake. So this is institutional staking. All of this together, it seems like, oh, okay, touched really many aspects of Ethereum, and also being a builder myself, right? So my first 3 years or even 4 years at Nethermind was just building, developing every day. I picked up yellow paper and I picked up tests from Ethereum. Oh, you see, this is the important role of the Ethereum Foundation. All the tests and yellow paper, they were prepared for the foundation. You can pick them up and it's like a spec and you can build it yourself. And then maybe it's easy to think like, oh, it just appears magically on the internet. So for 4 years, I was coding. The first 1.5 year or so was like totally independent. I didn't even know that the Alcor devs that I could join it, and I was coding the application, so the Nethermind client. And now asking about the process. So yes, I think first time I talked to Aya at Token 2049 in Singapore. Maybe at first I talked to her at Chief Tokyo in March, and then I talked to her at Token 2049 when she asked for some kind of discussion when I could provide feedback on how foundation can work better with attracting talent, with the leadership, of finding leadership after Danny was stepping down. And then again, I was reaching to discuss with the foundation some of the arrangements related to bringing some TradFi to work with the foundation treasury. And that's when I responded by saying, "Oh, actually, let's jump on a call and have a discussion about something." And then I learned that something was about whether I would like to discuss the position of the co-executive director. And then it was lots of conversations about the conflicts of interest, about my vision of how to execute, and understanding best the vision of Aya and Vitalik and others, talking to all the management team, a few days together with the management team.
So when you started, you did this sort of like listening tour. You talked to hundreds of people in Ethereum. Heard you say, I don't remember when this podcast came out, but I think you said 400, like maybe a month ago, to Cami Russo.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is now.
I slowed down with the one-on-one conversation. So I think around May, this started slowing down, and I started focusing more on some of the execution, the very particular outreach where I had conversations, and also there was lots of events in June. I think there was Berlin, Prague events, IFCAN, IFCC, so a slightly different format. I think it might have been 500.
Oh, okay. And what were people saying in those conversations?
Lots and lots of things, but obviously some of them were aggregating into very coherent vision. So people were saying, what about the communication, marketing, visibility? What about L2s? What about the fee secrets to L1? What are the future exciting things to build on Ethereum? What about the founder support, onboarding developers? They would ask about how about presence in US? How about the DevCon, DevConnect or events in US? Where how we'll build the Ethereum hubs, like the communities that will accelerate founders. And why don't we engage with DeFi enough? What we'll do with allocation of treasury? Why no transparency? How we can support institutions on privacy. Some people would say, what about privacy? What about losing values potentially of like if there are traditional finance institutions and there's capture of Ethereum? Why don't we scale? Why rescale? Everything, right? So, but there will be probably like 30, 40 common terms that started being like some design aspects, UX, interop was coming all the time. So then after a while, you start realizing, okay, we have more or less everything. and we just start addressing one by one. Every single thing has to be addressed.
And so, at this point, like you and Xiaowei have kind of released the main things that you're focusing on, which is scaling the L1, scaling blobs, which means, enabling more activity on the L2s and improving the user experience. So, I was curious, like how you decided upon those and like why those three felt like the three most important things to focus on.
Yeah, we had some conversations recently when Vitalik was almost saying that like, oh, it was like to rush decisions. So like you see the decision making here is really pick up what everyone is saying and just feel it and understand why it's important for everyone and start pushing in that direction, but also understanding that this is short term and you have a long term things that have to follow straight after. And now when we say scaling L1, scaling blobs and interrupt UX, we said that this will be 12 months of focus. And this was 3 months ago when we started talking about it, which means that now we have Fusaka and then Glamsterdam, and there should be 2 forks that will really show that we can deliver that. And much of it is helping with the ACD, like foundation of how it should participate in ACD and how foundation should express what we've learned from the ecosystem to ACD as well, and for the interrupt event that we organized in Berlin. So we had Okay, coming back. So you asked me how did we decide? At some point, Josh Rudolph posted something like this on Twitter. He said scale one, scale blobs, and interrupt UX. And I thought like, oh, he captured the essence of what everyone is saying. And I just like retweeted it, and I felt that everyone felt it, and there was like no real complaint among many conversations that I had. It's going that direction. I started repeating it, and people liked it. And I thought like, all right, this represents the mood of the community. But then we also realized that, realized that we had lots of discussions with the board about this might be potentially losing some of the protocol hardening aspects. Like, did we talk enough about security, about censorship resistance, and I realized that, yeah, for the short-term focus, I will have to push that this has to stay while we build understanding of the community that some things are really eternal and always there underneath. Whatever we say, you cannot really treat it as an override of those values of security, privacy, censorship resistance. So now the messaging is probably much more consistent. We show that protocol hardening. We show that this 12 months is also having a transition, and we'll start talking about it much more during DevConnect, that there'll be transition to the multi-year roadmap into protocol hardening, the post-quantum security, the better models for data availability, and many other things. We also started that 1 trillion security program about thinking about further hardening of the protocol security of Ethereum. That this is what really many institutions or users are saying is very important, security of the network. So let's say double down on it. Like it's probably very important when you start thinking about things like products or marketing wise, that instead of trying to suddenly appear in the areas that people don't consider that you belong there, you should really focus on the areas where people think that this is your advantage, this is why you exist, and just say that you get even better there. So that's why $1 trillion security. That's why we continue talking about privacy. You see that and that's very important for me, for the Ethereum Foundation, within all of this, to be brave in statements and very open communication, never feeling timid in expressing opinions of everyone in the foundation, but at the same time also understanding how to do that with appreciation for the entire community. So with understanding of the entire community. So all the researchers should be able to say what they're working on, but also when they work on it, they should understand how it affects everyone else and how it will be understood and whether you communicate clearly enough. Because just shouting about your ideas that you have without analyzing their impact might not be best from the foundation perspective, because there is some attention to the thoughts that are flowing from us. So wow, I drifted away from the early topic. So
Yeah,
you
no,
were
but
asking.
I mean, honestly, that's really interesting because
Mhm.
this almost gets to like, so I'm just going to make an analogy. There was a period where Bitcoin kind of went through the laser eyes period.
Mhm.
And it sort of felt like this sort of number go up kind of philosophy overtook some of the things that make Bitcoin Bitcoin, which is the decentralization and the security aspects and things like that. And now we do have like real concerns about Bitcoin's like long term security. And I don't mean to talk about Bitcoin, but I'm just saying that like when you said like, oh, this person's tweet kind of captures the conversations I've been having. And then now it sounds like, the discussions you're having internally make you realize like, oh, wait, but, we can't kind of sacrifice these other values or ideals that we have. And so there's sort of like a moment where you're kind of like blending the two, or you're just, trying to integrate them, like one in a more short term way, the other like in a long term way, something like that. So it just feels like it doesn't feel like you're drifting. It feels like you're adding to the conversation that people have been having. And I do think that there is a little bit of a push pull with these systems. Like I said, with the Bitcoin one, I feel like, these communities generally, they do, kind of, it's like a pendulum, like price matters to people. That's kind of why people say that crypto communities almost feel like religious. You show your conviction and your faith by buying and holding an asset, or, whatever it might be. So I don't feel like you drifted. I feel like you kind of gave added context. But I did want to ask. So this is kind of more like a cultural thing, but it sort of just ties into everything we're talking about, which is you may have heard this. Like, I don't know if you ever interviewed any people who had worked in Ethereum but decided to move to Solana. I have talked to some of those people. And by the way, so just because I know people are so triggered by the name Max Resnick, I am not talking about Max Resnick right here, right now. I'm just to make 100% clear. These are other people who worked in Ethereum and then moved to Solana. But, some of them felt like the Ethereum ecosystem was not super friendly to builders, that there was kind of a lot of inertia, that it was not necessarily supportive of like startups or of a more competitive atmosphere. And I heard you say on Bankless that you wanted to do more business development, and I wanted to, and coming from the foundation, that's kind of like from the Ethereum Foundation, let alone like any fund, like I'm not talking about other foundations which are much more into that kind of thing, but historically the Ethereum Foundation has not been like that. So I was curious, like, what does that mean to you? And, what kind of shift are you trying to signal to the community around that type of thing? In terms of like how you would like the foundation under your term to be.
Sure. Starting with a question, whether I spoke to people that moved to Solana, maybe some of them that moved to Solana entirely in a way. Yes, I met them through the journey also the last few years as a nomad and visiting all the different communities. And also in the last months, at least, I spoke to some fans or accelerators that started working more with Solana over Ethereum. Well, very often it was just addition of Solana to Ethereum, and it started saying, hey, we start feeling a bit uneasy because there is a pressure. So I moved to Solana, but like we very often they would add, but we want to stay on Ethereum. So like let's do something. Please listen to us. So definitely there were conversations, and then I was also talking to people simply from Solana community directly, right? Like I had a call with Kyle, and there was lots of learning of what they pay attention to, how they work with founders, how they started all the different solutions, and I think much of it was like many of the comments, the positive comments about Solana, were about the efficiency of business coordination and marketing efforts. And I thought that marketing on the foundation side, on Ethereum side, probably is mostly visibility on Twitter, because foundation started maybe like rejecting Twitter over time to some extent. And I felt that still the communication with the outside of the Web3 world happens on Twitter a lot, Twitter and LinkedIn, and then also talking to all the media, right? Like if foundation is under attack, then maybe it starts starts like hiding and saying, oh, like we'll not talk to everyone because of some past wrong articles or so. So that was one change of saying from now on you just like talk openly to everyone, because actually everyone is friendly when they say some tough questions, when they pose some tough questions. It's just like we should be ready to answer to all of those tough questions. There's also that part of bravery in communication, that we should be super open to just understand what are the concerns. So coming back to the topic of what we wanted to do on the business development side. So very early when joining Foundation and talking to people, I realized that James Smith had a very nice vision of how to accelerate the ecosystem development functions and how to structure those. And we've asked James to help us to structure EcoDev cluster of the foundation. So foundation nowadays like splits into 4 clusters: the operations, protocol, EcoDev, and LPSC as well came back to foundation. So EcoDev now has founders acceleration. It has Ethereum everywhere, which is about events, which it has very specific function of academic secretariat, and EcoDev automation. So improving the process and tooling that we have available. In the end, you can think of Ethereum as a network, and then building the network on top of a technical network, like a network of people, network of founders, is probably a super important aspect. And I always thought of myself as like I have to grow into the role of super connector, like ultra connector, when traveling around the world. That's what I was doing a lot for Nethermind in the past. Just appearing and asking people what do you need to build, and then thinking of who can help them, and just building that the network of connections everywhere, wherever I was going, and thinking that if you do that, then naturally you're embedding yourself in many of those connections, but without pushing yourself, without selling something, but just being there ready to help. And then people know you and they reach out if they need help. And that is very, very satisfying way of building business, and also extremely satisfying way of building the network. Just like very devoid of thinking about building your own name or your own company, but just thinking you're helping the ecosystem to grow, but just like connecting one by one all of those different things. And then business development in this aspect, it's no longer about business, but it's a role of connecting others in the ecosystem. You're doing the same job, but instead of connecting yourself with others all the time, you're just helping others connect with each other. And that's the role that James is understanding perfectly. And he also built a fantastic team, like for enterprise, for founders, for developers. And you see effects of this already, but probably soon even more, because some of them just started.
Yeah, well, I saw also you tweeted about what you called a secondary roadmap. So some of this kind of BD or culture stuff might also play into here. I'm just going to list like some of the beginning ones that you mentioned, which are always mint assets on L1, which I found interesting. This would mean like no NFTs on like layer twos or something, I'm guessing, or
No, it's
no. Okay,
it's
what
an
is it?
invitation to mint on L1 and then immediately move to L2 for larger, more valuable assets. So thinking that whatever is of higher value, you just anchor it on L1 and then move it for like if you want to trade it very, very rapidly, or maybe even in localized markets or with some innovation to the UX, then you go to L2s. So it was an invitation for many of the institutions to say, okay, we choose an L2 that we feel a right way for branding and some particular solutions, innovations, but we'll just mint on L1 and bridge to L2 immediately. So we felt that it would represent best the security model for Ethereum for the larger value assets. And it's the same for the high value identities on NFTs. Like, so if you want to play for NFTs in a commercial sense, maybe something like, when you, I don't know, I remember that from childhood when I would buy a bubble gum, that would be something inside that I could collect, right? So this is, let's say, commercial NFT. So then probably you want to go to an L2 and have something that has that value over time, but it's more collectible aspect than brand building. But if you're one of your famous, like like very well respected NFT artists, like think of like Rafik Anadol or Beeple, like that's you want to tell them, no, definitely L1 is where you mint. and for many other artists it will be always L1, but then it can move the assets to L2, bridge them, and make them like somehow embedded into this L2 economy.
So
So
right now, for instance, like creators on Zora, like if they're not
Mhm.
known, like you feel like doing it on base is fine, but once they get to a certain kind of, level of fame or whatever, then you would advise them to do it on the L1?
Uh, I think it's always fluid because it's an interesting concept. You're asking here, when you create something on Zora, obviously, like even if there are collectibles in the bubble games, like from 50, 60 years old, some of them might have grown into like $1 million value because they have some like low print particular value because they appeared and people didn't even expect how much of it will blow up culturally. So the same things may happen on some L2s. I think that when you start seeing the value over time, that you want to somehow anchor it to a one, you understand. So not always you can predict where the value appears. And I think that many fantastic things will appear in Zara, will appear on many L2s. And then at some point you realize, oh, okay, that's really valuable item. And then you want to somehow market on L1, maybe like bridge there and back or so, or wrap it around the L1 value wrapper and send back. I think not all of those models were yet designed, but that's my thinking, and I'm still exploring it a bit with researchers of understanding of is it really a correct way of thinking about it. So far, I think that to much extent it is.
Okay. Well, so also in this list, you put Win RWA, real world assets, which feels like it's already happening for at least some things. If you look at what the Biddle Fund is doing, what Securitize, obviously that was sort of like the first big one. You also wrote Win Stables, which again, that's a BD thing. It's very, right now, I'm sure you're very well aware of everything going on in stablecoin land and how people are on TV. Tom Lee is talking on TV about how Ethereum is a stablecoin chain. And you also wrote comms improvements, which I think is probably one of the bigger gripes that people had with the previous iteration of the Ethereum Foundation. So can you just talk a little bit about your philosophy? Because I feel like BD and comms are they're tied. So yeah, I'd just be interested to hear more of your thoughts on how you think
Uh,
about how Ethereum will win in those areas and how, that ties to your BD and comms philosophies.
Yeah, I feel like it all comes back to all those conversations, right? So I feel that as a director or anything, or as a leader, you can be stubborn and not humble and think that you have best ideas, and that when other people tell you something, you think that you know better. Or you can be humble and understand that actually, in this ecosystem, there's so many smart people, so they know better, most likely. And they repeatedly tell you something that your talent should be in aggregating this. So that's where it comes from, right? So when you understand where what you'll do with RWAs, with communication, with PT, then it's just responding to all of this and being willing to do that. It creates that more servant role of the executive director rather the one that tries to build a vision. Look, Ethereum has fantastic visionaries. I mean, it has Vitalik, right? So who started the thing, and you don't want to just push it into thousands of visions and no execution. You want to have people to come and say, like, we'll just execute, we continue, we listen, and we think how to do it best. So this is about communication. I think that communication on my side is just telling people, instead of focusing too much about sharing your own views, think about everyone and why we're building that and how you can reflect it and how you can answer questions and how you can listen rather than just talk. And this is not the most standard approach, I think, in Web3, because we used to thinking that the growth is through building your own branding and sharing your controversial opinions very often as just this engagement, looking for engagement. So I think this is the way to win, and this represents also very well the collaborative aspect of Ethereum, and it also responds to many of the questions about L2, L1, and then it's funny how the single concept, how it touches so many different things. When people come to you and say, like, how about the L2 versus L1? I said, it's not versus. So just start communicating and sharing and thinking, behaving on the human level like it's one network. And it's the first response to the interop. Because technology for interop, sure, is very challenging and complicated. But if you just build a technology but people feel like they're not working together, then there's no interop. So this is aspect of winning. And you were asking about this, and you were asking about, I think I missed like half of your question
The
here. Not that I didn't.
communications, like your philosophy around how the
Mhm.
EF should, communicate to people.
So that's that thing. Yes, that's what I mean by that. But listening mostly, and then responding to what people want to hear. Every now and then you talk about vision. Sure, we can say now we really want to have an attention to the next 10 years. But even when we start talking about the next 10 years of Ethereum, I think instead of focusing on what Vitalik says, what Justin Drake says, what any one of us would say, we started asking questions more and more like, what's your vision for the next 10 years of Ethereum? Like, what's your white paper? What you're building? How you envision the world in the next 10 years? We invited all the communities to meet together around the world, and to probably they had those conversations, right? Like, so that was me talking about, instead of thinking about the past 10 years, think about the next 10 years. It's not because there's no appreciation for people that build Ethereum. There's massive appreciation. And I know people give their lives, professional lives, to Ethereum, and they breathed with it, and they sometimes burned, and they sometimes burned and came back. And this is beautiful. When I say let's talk about next 10 years, it's just spark again that feeling that, even as we see how much has been built, it's like also nothing has been built, but not in the sense we haven't achieved something, but there's so much more. And it's just is growing because the vision is so broad. So this is the aspect of communication, giving the voice to everyone, and this is also decentralization of voice and amplifying it. So acting as a super efficient amplifier, connector of voices of people, building spaces to work on it, building technology to work together. It works, and it helps founders, because founders have to be excited about something, right? So it's sure the money is there always in blockchain space, but I say that even whenever now I see OGs that somehow reject the money and get a bit disappointed with the approach of new founders coming and just like grabbing some quick wins at the beginning, or chasing some coins, I say like, look, I'm like, you can study the history of almost every single OG, and that's how they started. It's just that people so quickly realize that they just thought that this is what drives them, but this is not what drives them. Like they start, and after 1 month they just like forget what they did. Like they invested in something, bought some coins here and there, and then they realize, oh, okay, actually I bought it because I was excited to build, and I started to build, and I almost forgot. And this is why people keep it forever and they never sell, because they stay for everything that brought them here.
So I also wanted to ask, the Ethereum Foundation has had, we'll just call it, an interesting relationship to the Ether price throughout its history. I do think, from my book, it became very clear that the Ethereum Foundation had this sort of like fear about the SEC from the crowd sale and all these things. And so during that time, there were actually kind of like strict, admonitions to not talk about the Ether price. And, I wondered like what your perspective is on that. How much do you think the Ethereum Foundation should consider the Ether price when making decisions? What kinds of decisions do you think should factor in the Ether price? And, when you, what would your vision be for what people think about Ether, the asset? And I'll just throw in the phrase ultrasound money while I pose that question, because I'm just curious, like how you think people should think about it. So I know 3-part question again. Sorry for the complexity, but how much do you think the Ethereum Foundation should consider the Ether price, and for which decisions? And then, how do you want people to view the Ether price?
So the foundation doesn't really talk eternally about Ether price. So since I joined, I don't think we ever talked about Ether price in any other aspect than thinking about the treasury and spending, right? So obviously, Ethereum Foundation holds at the moment around $800 million in Ether, and now it's allocating it in DeFi protocols, which means that the price of Ether affects our spending, our planning, and budgeting. And this is how we talk about Ether price. It's never being talked about less on the management level in the context of decision making or strategizing. And I think that nowadays, and this is beautiful about Ethereum, I don't think we have ability to influence beyond just like influences like anybody else. And again, influencing the price is really aspect of the markets really, and the perception of the protocol. And if you think of the perception of the protocol, when people start treating it as a, well, whatever they define it, like as a store of value, they think like, will Ethereum be resilient? Will it exist forever? If they think of Ethereum or Ether as an asset as participating in DeFi because it's being very naturally native token of this very rich DeFi ecosystem on Ethereum, used as collateral, used for staking. It's aspect of security. It's used in burning, and so you have all those different functions of Ether that just being observed by others, and everything that we do about the protocol is like as long as the protocol provides that promise of the security and resilience of the thriving system, then I guess some people will think that this is connected, some others will think not, and you have so many different interpretations from various institutions.
Wait, and I'm sorry, when you say some people think this is connected, you mean the Ether price to the security of the network?
No, this is partially, obviously, this is obvious that Ether is designed to be securing the network, right? Like that you stake Ether to secure the network, and then the Ether defines the level of economic security. There are some nuances of this, of like how much of this directly converts into the security of particular DeFi protocols and particular L2 protocols, and then you have restaking on top, and the complexity grows as the economy of DeFi and Ethereum starts being analyzed more deeply. And I encourage everyone like really to join that aspect of understanding this new economy of Ethereum. So no, I say that different funds, ETH holders, or people who use ETH for whatever purposes will have their own interpretations, and this is normal in many markets. And like sometimes the assets are much easier to understand. I think Ether is quite complex, at least the way I go through that journey. So then if you go back, I think that the foundation understands that foundation goals are clear. It's about the impact of Ethereum network in delivering the values of Ethereum to the global community, to everyone on Earth. And this is the privacy, this is security, censorship resistance, it's open source solutions. And when we push for that, I think that it's simply being seen as very positive for Ethereum and for anything that is related to Ethereum.
And so, but do you think that Ethereum Foundation should try to kind of actively shape the narrative around, what gives Ether value? And that's why I mentioned like the ultrasound money meme, because that, like EIP 1559, like a big part of it was, I think, to kind of, sharpen the monetary policy of Ether and tie the value of Ether to activity on the network. And then with Denkun, it feels like that relationship got weakened, I would say. So, at this point, like, is the foundation thinking about doing anything else to strengthen that link, or?
So no, the role of the foundation is not to think about it, but to think about the general success of the protocol. When you think about 1559, it's a good thing that I was really involved in 1559 at that time, right? So as a core developer, as a builder, I participated in all the discussions about introduction of 1559 and was analyzing the outcomes and the impact on the network. And sure, you had all the people talking about ultrasound and burning, and Justin Drake would be definitely the one person that you could place here as a leader of this way of thinking. But then I really like to place Justin as a designer of some future of Ethereum and as a thinker of many many of the ideas and memes around, but not you cannot just identify just entirely just this is Ethereum, because many people inside Ethereum or Ethereum Foundation or ecosystem will not always agree with just whatever Justin says, because Justin has so many successful visions about what will happen in 2-3 years, and very often he's really on spot on the timing, on the technological shifts, but we not always agree on like how to talk about it. Coming back to 1559, so I've seen it at that time as a massive improvement to the UX. If like I was using Ethereum obviously a lot for sending transactions before 1559. And since 1559, I never have to think about setting the gas price, right? So, and this was a huge improvement to the UX. There were some things that were lost because of that particular mechanism in DeFi, like the sponsored transactions, like zero gas transactions became a bit either more complicated or impossible. Some of the like block space derivatives projects were impossible after 1559. But 1559 for pricing, for automating the pricing and allowing people to have a very reliable mechanism for sending transaction was fantastic, and I still think it was a massive success. Now, when you say Denkun, so first of all, Denkun's role was to help the L2s to scale and to deliver solution for the L2s to have data availability and to finally deliver those like below 1 cent transactions. And then when I think about it, would be last September, Token 2049. I remember some interviews with Vitalik, with others, when we said, look, it's a massive success. Finally, we have all those transactions that happen at a fraction of a cent, and now we all benefit from that. So it's a massive celebration. But what it leads to, like that temporarily you have extremely lower price of executing transactions. So this is successful, but when you start treating Ethereum as it's all about fees, then the success of the fees dropping might be seen by, well, like twisted in a way into understanding that it's a failure, that the fees dropped, but not. It was massive success, and it also allows it to scale, and then it sets us for the roadmap of this like global adoption of Ethereum ecosystem together with L2s. You can move the fees up in the future easily for various systems, redirect more to L1 if this is valuable for the network security. I think that's this is also seen now in clarifying for Fusaka the pricing, the block pricing, so setting the floor for that. And it's always for building the very robust, resilient protocol that will give everyone this expectation that the protocol is there forever, that it may be seen as a store of value, that any aspects of the fees are just like the absolute base level of what Ethereum really means in the long term for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more like trade-offs, and the fact that the price of Ether was no longer tied to the activity was or not no longer, but just less tied, was more like an unintended, or yeah, I'll just call it a side effect. But anyway.
Yeah, but sorry, like I think the good thing is that so many people started suddenly saying like, oh, okay, we can finally just remove these shackles of thinking about it, Ether and Ethereum this way, and they started thinking about it as this like Bitcoin like asset of the long-term store value. So I think this was positive because everyone started thinking Ethereum economy is the one to stay with and to be around, and we want to participate in it, and it will be very much embedded into this entire global economies.
Yeah, but I do think that this problem plays into the interoperability bit that we also started to touch on. So how are you thinking about that problem? Like, how do you, or just how is the EF at the moment thinking about how to resolve that problem?
I think interoperability is the hardest of the three challenges that we are talking about, maybe because the scaling on one, scaling blobs are continuation of something that people have been thinking a lot, and it's very like well defined within the protocol which areas you have to touch. And interop and UX is like 1,000 small pieces and coordination of those between L2s and L1s, and solving some problems that are being solved also in many different ways by the protocols on top of Ethereum. So Interop is a challenge that we're working on, and I think that Dev Connect will have a lot of cool things to present. I know that the coordination teams in the AA and Interop space, so Josh Rudolph and also AA team from Yoav at the foundation, are working on two major solutions that will show how the interop in the Ethereum ecosystem may work much better. Why is it also a challenge? Is because you're answering questions of how similar L2s should be to L1, how much innovation they could bring. What if they start introducing their own interrupt solutions ahead? Like how do we adopt some of the improvements back to L1? What do you really call an L2? Is it just an EVM solution, or is it non-EVM solution that is settling on Ethereum? Obviously, we want to have this broader scope for broader innovation, but also it creates more challenges for particular interop aspects. So if we do it right, then we have this large thriving Ethereum ecosystem with lots of innovation and a bit of this fashion and branding aspect of L2s that can go to the users, to the niche aspects, to the regions where you can build hyper localized chains, and still all of that borrowing the liquidity, providing very secure bridging, spreading security of Ethereum properly. So I think this is where we pay technically the most. I pay the most attention to in the last weeks, the interop.
So I did also want to ask, and again, this is relating back to the Ether price. So here we are at this moment in time. There's all these new crypto treasury companies popping up. Just seems like every day there's multiple. Many of the recent ones have been Ether vehicles. So aside from SharpLink, which is I think the biggest one, or sorry, BitMine is the biggest. I think SharpLink is the second biggest. I'm forgetting actually. So they're the top two. I know that. So BitMine is the one that's led by Tom Lee, SharpLink, Joe Lubin. There's Bit Digital as well, Ether Machine, GameSquare, BTCS, Ether Machine, ETHZilla. I'm sure there's more. And you guys did sell. Let's see. So you sold 10,000 Ether to SharpLink. The price was about $2,500, but this was only a few weeks ago, and today, Ether's trading at 3,800. So, you clearly could have gotten a much better price, made a lot more money from that sale. But, I see like people, this goes back to just in general, how the foundation's MO has been to kind of convert into dollars by just selling the Ether rather than just trying to use DeFi to hold on to the asset. And so I was wondering, why it is that you guys still feel like that is something that you want to do, but then in particular, why you would sell it to a treasury company when a lot of people are just talking about how they feel like this trend may not end well. There is a situation where some of these companies might take on too much leverage. They might have to liquidate some of their Ether, which could then cause the price to drop, which could cause other liquidations. You would get this cascade, and it just seems, like a sort of risky like vehicle in which to hold Ether. So again, multi-part question. But why is it that you would continue to just sell rather than try to hold on to the asset, and then why sell to one of these vehicles that people view as being in a little bit of a bubble?
Sure. So starting, why, what was the strategy for selling ETH? So, and whether we use DeFi for getting yield. So first of all, yes, we published the treasury policy and the DeFi strategy and the DeFi plan guidance, where we said that from our holdings of ETH, we'll be delegating it to the DeFi protocols, and we expect the yield from all of these allocations. So we'll hold some ETH undelegated. We'll stake some ETH with our own staking solutions for the DevOps teams and the FundOps teams at the foundation, and the rest of it will just allocate to DeFi protocols. Then separately, we also announced that we'll want to maintain around 2.5 years of the runway of all the Ethereum Foundation spending in fiat. And this is when you think of the resilience of the foundation as the global environment, politics, regulations that keep changing, and sometimes we believe the foundation and many other organizations are a bit more at risk of any like adversarial regulatory actions, as you've seen in the past, right, with SEC before the changes from last year. So we need to be ready for the stages where we can cover operational expenses, both in fiat and in ETH. So that announcement of 2.5 years gave pretty clear numbers, right? So we said we were holding I believe $120 million in fiat. And then we wanted to extend it to around $280 million in fiat. So it would give you like around the number from 160 million to $1 worth of ETH to sell. We didn't set any specific timeline for that. So you can expect that maybe it will happen over a year, maybe slightly longer. So I just want to go in that direction. And then there was this first sale that we felt like it can either go for what foundation used to do, which would be sending into the centralized exchanges and doing the OTC trade there, or go to the SBET. And SBET felt like, first of all, it's Jalubin, it's something big in Ethereum, and it's a single OTC transaction, and it was executed at the TLAP price for a day. So like when you set that price to 570 or something, that was simply agreed ahead of time that on that day we'll calculate the TLAP price and we'll execute at that time. So then coming back to why. Maybe one thing that I'll add is we are preparing now the operational documents of how to execute the sales in the future, and we're just connecting with all these like ETH Treasury strategy companies, and also with various OTC desks at exchanges. I want to make sure that we have a lot of venues where we can go to and ask for the quote. So the RFQ. The foundation is really like trusted, credible partner, so it can get really the good pricing when selling ETH, and it should see the best execution among all of those venues and treat them equally by just simply asking for a quote and executing at the best price. So this will introduce much more clarity of why we execute where, and it just requires a bit of operational improvements. Now that last aspect of your question, which was about the risks around the strategy companies, I think that we started discussing it internally of how to encourage the community and the financial markets to provide as much scrutiny as possible of how each of those companies operates underneath. Like what, as you say, what kind of leverage they do, like what kind of DeFi interactions they do, how much of the wrapping you have. I agree with you. I mean, when I told before that it's not necessarily that the blockchain people are just better than the TradFi people of the past. It's just like we can claim that there were these massive financial markets collapses, the bailouts, and so on. That's this is people, like people stay people, and it can happen also in the blockchain space. And we've seen massive failures in the blockchain space, and we should always be very much aware of those risks and see them. The beauty of blockchain is that it brings a lot of transparency to lots of interactions, but the strategy companies, treasury companies, very often merge the decentralized markets and decentralized markets. It's like a hybrid of TradFi and DeFi. So it doesn't yet have this all beauty of transparency of DeFi, which means that you still want to have maybe some rating agencies, many like additional auditing and scrutiny into how exactly they execute custody, staking, and so on. So obviously, lots of risks, but they are buyers, and from the foundation perspective, operationally, to find the best buyer when selling ETH without affecting the markets in a stupid way. Like when you sell large amounts of assets, you can do really stupid things. Like just go directly to the spot markets on the illiquid exchanges or so. We just don't do that. But then we don't take really in selling ETH. I mean, we don't try to be opinionated on saying that we sell ETH for a particular reason. I just go to the market.
Okay, so last question. I know we've gone over time, but obviously, Ethereum it's not only just on this upswing price wise, but it's like really in the news for just being the chain that all of these huge corporate partners are using. So obviously, the most recent announcement was the Robinhood one, where they're announcing this Robinhood chain, and behind the scenes, I guess people are saying that they originally were going to go with Solana. Coinbase, here they are. They have been building with Base. Now they're really all in on this everything app with Base, and at the same time, it's kind of interesting because just in crypto overall, we're seeing that crypto is sort of at this inflection point. Like the ApeCoin DAO is going to, move to a centralized entity. Jupiter paused DAO voting for 6 months. A16Z wrote up a blog post saying that they felt the foundation model was broken. They felt that it creates more friction than decentralization. So I was just curious, Ethereum really has been one of the biggest proponents of the decentralized ethos. And I just wondered, what you thought it meant that we're sort of seeing this shift more towards centralized options, and just generally how Ethereum thinks about its partnerships with those centralized entities. What is it that they add to Ethereum or to crypto?
So from the foundation perspective, obviously, as we said, that now we're communicating more and we're executing this BD-like role. It remains that foundation doesn't go to those entities and doesn't try to arrange some kind of commercial relationship or transactional approach. We just come and help to connect with other players in the ecosystem. We help to by answering questions. We mentor them and we listen to what is needed in the protocol to address the with assets, real life problems. And the protocol has to respond to the real world, and the core developers and the infrastructure builders, they not always understand everything that happens in the world. So listening broadly is very important. Now, many of those large institutions that you mentioned, whether it's Robinhood or others, they barely ever communicate with the foundation. I think this is part of their design of how they want to launch and prove that really they're in control, and they borrow the security and they use the global neutral network, but they don't take the risks of going to the network where you have to have this active conversation with the foundation, which means that particular for Robinhood, practically I never had a conversation until a few days before, and I just reached out and asked them, but they said there's really nothing here. So they had everything planned, and I said, it's great. So we want to see that. We want to show that we're available, but we don't want to be active in saying just bring it to Ethereum. We encourage people to convince them, to show them the reasons why everyone is moving to Ethereum, why they're choosing Ethereum, or why we're building it in the way that is the best solution design that we encourage. And now, coming back to your question, when you say those institutions are launching, how they do that, why they would go to the foundation model, where I think that still you have the L2s in Ethereum that participate also in the BD process, and because they have this more branding, competitive niche aspects, so they may enter into commercial arrangements, or they may compete with each other. So that helps also the Ethereum ecosystem with innovation, with bringing on board other institutions, or guiding them through models, so maybe L3, L2, their own L2, or on one of the L2s. And the institutions will be choosing how much control they want to have. And we have to serve the guidance of looking at every single of those networks, answering questions. Are they really delivering what they're claiming on the security side, on the decentralization side, on the safety of assets? And this is really important role of the foundation. So you see L2 Bead providing this guidance on the stages of different rollups. You will see our work on security and pointing out where are the problems, working on interop and showing where the interop works, where it doesn't work. Lots of challenges may come in the future from institutions really at some point not going for this analysis of what is really delivered from different designs of L2s. That's why also we try to preemptively address it with collaborations with L2Beat and with other institutions, and by providing also very deep research and analysis and guidance on it.
Okay. All right. Well, Tomasz, thank you so much for talking at length. I really appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure having you on Unchained.
Thank you so much. It was an extreme pleasure. You're so knowledgeable and so well prepared, and the questions are great, and the atmosphere is great as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. To learn more about the Ethereum Foundation and Tomasz, check out the show notes for this episode.